Welcome back. This is Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about all things board game related. Today we're going to bring you a Kickstarter preview called Rise to Nobility by Final Frontier Games. They recently brought us last year Cavern Tavern.
Yeah.
And this is a dice placement, worker placement style game.
Set in the same universe.
It is set in the same universe.
In fact, there is a location called Cavern Tavern right here on the board.
That's right. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this game. We're going to try to walk you guys through all the components and the basic feel of the game. We're not going to get into the nuts and bolts of it because there's a lot of a lot of mechanics going on here. But the basic idea is that once Cavern Tavern had happened, now they're establishing a city, and each of the players is going to represent a noble lord. And they're going to be given a character card that gives them a very unique ability once they become a noble in this land.
Once you become a noble, each character card you have to develop through the game. Mid to late game is when that's going to happen.
Each player is also going to have a player board, which is kind of their own little settlement within this giant city. And there's a track on the bottom of the settlement card, which is your reputation. The whole game kind of centers around the reputation and what you're allowed and not allowed to do with your dice. You're going to have 5 dice, and you roll all 5 dice every turn, no matter what.
Right, and you start with 9 reputation.
Yeah.
So the trick here is you're rolling this dice, and you can use different dice of different value on these spots, but we start with 9 reputation, and when you roll your die, you can only use 9 of the pips, basically. Yeah. So if you roll a bunch of 5s, you're not going to use some of those.
All but 1 die. If you roll all 5s or a 6 at the start of the game. So you're kind of dividing up your dice to use in certain combinations on the board. And there's a lot of different locations on where you can take your die. The whole idea, though, is that you're wanting to bring in settlers into your little tableau here and settle them and give them houses in order to do further things in the game. Exactly. So this game has a lot of those combinations where you have to do very specific things in very specific orders in order to build up.
Yeah, you're fulfilling these settler cards in order to add them to your settlement. So at its core, you're collecting a lot of different resources in order to fulfill those cards. There's some other things to fulfill as well, but you're getting those settlers onto your card or in your settlement is the main route.
So at the beginning of the round, each player is going to pick up all 5 of their dice and roll them. And then in turn order, they're going to use their dice in specific combinations onto the board. Now, let me walk you through most of the locations on the board. In the upper left-hand corner, you have the Cavern Tavern, and there's always going to be 6 settlers that can come into your village. At any time during the game, you can hold at least 3 of these settlers off to the left side and house them through the course of the game. You can't have any more than 3. The trick on this location is that you have to place a die that is equal to or greater than the previous die that was placed there. And you can only have a certain amount of dice here depending upon the number of players that are participating. It plays 2 to 5 players.
Right. It's interesting because you could go there and keep people from grabbing other settlers by using a really high die. You place a 6 there, and very few other people are going to be able to go.
That's right. On the opposite side of the board, you have the construction yard. It works in the opposite way. You want to get the lowest dice. Right. So you either have to have the same equal die or one lower than. The construction yard, you pay $5 to take one of your homes. You have a total of 7 homes or 7 settlements that you can build into your tableau. And you take that house and you put it off to the side of or on your board, but off to the side, meaning that that's another house for your settlers to come in and occupy.
Right. These 2 first locations are kind of the bookends of the process of the game. You're going to be acquiring settlers, and then to settle them, you need to put them in a house. And in between is when you're collecting the resources to fulfill them.
There's a couple other easy locations to understand. You have a port off to the bottom right-hand side. Those require a very specific die, and only one player can go into each of those locations, either a 1 pip all the way up to a 6 pip. When you go to those locations, you can sell off the 6 different types of goods that you've acquired through the course of the game. Each of those goods are worth different amounts depending upon what tile, and then the number of goods that you can sell is equal to the pip that you place there.
Exactly. So oftentimes you won't have a lot of goods to sell, so you might have to burn a 6, because very, very few times have we played and seen someone sell 6 goods in one turn.
Because you need those goods in order to bring in settlers.
Exactly.
We'll get into that and how to fulfill a settler in a little bit. You have Burke the Clerk, who is the active governor of this city right now. Burke the Clerk is in the middle of the board. When you go to his location, you get to grab modifier tokens. Those are modifiers that either add +1 or a -1 to your die roll. And he also allows you to remove specific areas of the board and refill them.
Yeah, when you go there, you're able to use your die to grab some number of tokens, and then, like Jeremy said, you can say, let's wipe the settlers, or let's wipe the guild hall.
Now, as you'll notice, these locations on the actual interior of the board are a little bit different than ones in the exterior. You'll notice that each of these locations have 3 different areas that you can go to, and they have numbers on them, either a 1 and 2 pip die, a 3 and 4, or a 5 and 6, meaning that only one player can go there, and they have to use a value of one of those 2 areas. Off to his right is the White Council. The White Council allows you to build up your reputation, either a +1 or a +3, depending upon the pip number of the die that you place there, and that just modifies your reputation to use in a future round. You can't use it right then when you gain the reputation.
This is a huge spot on the board. The White Castle, I mean, like I said, you start with 9. So you learn right away during that first roll that you need more reputation.
Yeah.
So going to the White Castle early on in order to get that reputation up is key. And you'll see, if you use a 1 and 2 pip, you're only going up 1 all the way to a 5 and 6 gets you 3 more reputation.
On the bottom of the board are buildings that you can build. Again, he works very similar to the port. You have to use a very specific die, pay a very specific amount of money in order to buy these buildings. The trick for these buildings is that you have to have workers in particular locations to even go to those locations. So again, we're talking about the whole combo factor. You have to do something in order to do something else in order to build the buildings.
Everything has a process in this game for sure. And the processes are pretty interesting. I mean, I don't think they're overly complicated. There's very few things you can just go to and do.
Yeah. On the very right-hand side of the board, you have a nobility track. The nobility track states how powerful you've become. The game is all about nobility. It's nobility that gives you your victory points. And there's 2 different kinds of levels in there. There's one to become a simple noble. That opens up paths for you, as well as becoming a white noble, and that's the white shield that you see on the nobility track. That is tied in very specifically to the bottom right-hand portion of the board, which is called the Stone Council. The Stone Council is another location where 1 to 3 players can be placed with a certain pip die in order to fulfill requests from these 6 different types of lords. And all these lords tie into the settlers that you have. So you have to have very specific settlers to go to very specific lords, and you have to have a nobility that's high enough to go to them.
Exactly. Yet another sort of process that you at least have to go through mentally, because if you want to fulfill something here for the dwarf lord, you can look at those 3 tiles in a column above him. You're going to have to fulfill that, but you have to have dwarves in your settlement first.
And then the resources.
And then what Jeremy was saying just a second ago, you'll have to have climbed up the nobility track enough to fulfill, in the upper right of each of these tiles is the icon, either denoting the noble or the white noble icon.
And the Stone Council does nothing but give you victory points, but it also knocks down your reputation because you're having favoritism towards one of the different lords. The crux and the whole meat of the game, besides the reputation, which we already mentioned, are the 6 different guilds on the board. These guilds allow you to gain resources. And as we said, there's 6 different types of resources. When you collect the resources, they go along the top portion of your board. Going to these resources going to these guilds does a couple different things. If you go in the 1 or 2 section, it gives you the least amount of resources, but it also allows you to place the settlers that you've collected. Now remember, when you have these settler cards in your hand, you don't collect them until you've actually brought them into your settlement, which means you need a house, which means you need to fulfill the settler in the first place. And then you can bring in these settlers onto these locations to become artisans. And there's locations around here which are worker placement spots around each of these guilds. The number of workers that can go there is again dependent upon how many players are participating in the game. And those settlers will give you benefits through the course of the game, like extra gold, and then they actually become master guildsmen, which give you future benefits, which are tied into the buildings.
Yeah, you can associate your workers with these locations, and you can see above each of these locations where you've built buildings, if you've taken one of those artisans and made them a guild master, you're able to get that whenever someone goes to any location here, right?
Any of the locations, they fill backwards. So, once you obtain those areas and become a guild master, you're going to be getting an ongoing benefit through the course of the game. The earlier you build them, the more benefits you have, obviously.
It's that opportunity to sort of stake your claim around the board to benefit from everyone else's play.
So you're going to be doing one of 2 different things. You're either placing a worker onto the board to take the action, or you're doing one of your settlers. You're actually fulfilling a settlement. You'll notice, or fulfilling a settler. You'll notice on the bottom they have a particular type of resource that they require. And at the top, it tells you how many resources, a maximum and a minimum. I'm not going to go into exactly the math and how it's done, but there are some calculations on how many resources you can give to them. And then once you get them, you put them onto your board. They give you a reward first, either settlers or nobility when you collect them. So if you get settlers, you take that many settlers, settlers and you put them onto your board, and you have to have a house already built for them
Right.
to actually go in, and then they can be used on the board to become artisans.
Yeah.
So again, and we keep saying it, there's a multi-step process for everything that you do in this game, which means that there's a lot of pre-planning in the game. You really have to think about your actions, what you want to do this round, and how it's going to feed into something you're going to do 2 rounds from now.
Absolutely. Not only that plus it being a worker placement game means that you're going to run into situations where someone else does it maybe just before you do.
Yeah.
Which we've run into. I wouldn't say it's take that, but there is definitely some blocking going on and some basically pulling the rug out from under people's feet by taking the tile that is maybe the only thing they were going after. Then you're left with some resources that you have to
Either
sort of
sell off or
adjust.
try to figure out a way.
That's exactly where this comes into play, where you can sell off some of those resources, basically make the most of a bad situation where someone's taken something that you're going after.
It's definitely a Euro-centric game. I mean, there's heavier portions in this game that require a lot of thought on how you want to progress in the game.
And, through playing it, you start to develop a sense for where you can score your points, and that you can score your points in different ways.
Yeah.
The games we've played, there's been people who've gone the Guildmaster route and got a bunch of things out there.
Got their nobility up through that way.
But then there's other situations where you might do the Guildmaster, you get the nobility, but if it's a location that for one reason or another the other players haven't gone to or don't go to much, you're not getting those extra benefits from being the Guildmaster there.
Right.
So again, you have to kind of look around and see, okay, he's got some settlers and he's got some settlers that require the red resource.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go Guildmaster there.
Yeah.
If you don't do that, you'll find yourself Guildmaster of a lonely guild that doesn't have a lot of traffic.
There's a really neat balance, too, on the artisans versus the guildmaster. Those artisans do give you good benefits and give you money, which is really, really tight in the game throughout the course of the game. And as David alluded to, you have to decide very early in the game if you want to make them a guildmaster. Because if you make them a guildmaster, they're no longer an artisan. They no longer give you that benefit, but they do give you the points throughout the course of the game.
You're basically converting and making a decision, like you said, from the benefits of the artisan, which aren't insignificant, to the benefits of the guildmaster, which, the biggest one being you're going up the nobility track, you're scoring some points.
Yep. So guys, that is Rise to Nobility. If this interests you, please go check it out. Make sure you make comments below, subscribe to us, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, everything else that we do here at Man vs. Meeple, and we will catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.